They walk into the abandoned village with hunger clawing at their ribs, seeing empty windows, like watching eyes and feeling the silence heavier than the ruined houses. The sky above them is pale like wet paper, and the wind tastes of rust and ashes. They step over broken glass and old shoes lying forgotten in the dust. Their footsteps sound too loud, like a reminder that they are still alive. When everything around them has given up, they look at the doorways that lead to darkness, the curtains, torn like the wings of dead birds, the fences falling in tired angles, and they wonder if anyone will come out. If anyone will say, "You are home now, you can rest now," but there is only the cold breath of the wind, whispering through the empty spaces. They pass a well with a cracked edge where water used to sing, but now only a dry echo answers when they drop a stone. They keep walking past the place where a swing hangs by one chain, twisting slowly like a ghost playing alone. They see the schoolhouse, with its door hanging off, and inside the floor is littered with papers with drawings of suns and trees and stick figures with smiles, drawn in crayon, but all the colors are faded like the memory of laughter that once lived here. They find a bicycle, rusted against a tree, the tires melted away, the chain dangling loose, and they think about how fast it could have carried someone away from this place, but it did not. It stayed, and it died here. Like everything else, they pass a church with its windows, broken, the cross above the door leaning forward as if it could no longer hold itself up. They do not go inside. They can feel that there is nothing inside for them, nothing inside for anyone anymore. They see the fields beyond the last houses, the fields that should be green but now they are brown with weeds that crack when the wind touches them. The scarecrow standing with its hat fallen off and its face eaten away by rain and time. They keep walking because there is nothing else to do, because standing still feels like dying. They are looking for water, looking for bread, looking for someone to tell them where to go, what to do, how to keep living in a world that has forgotten how to be alive. They pass a house where a single door bangs softly in the wind, and the sound is like a heartbeat in the silence. They look inside and see a cup still on the table, a spoon beside it, a chair pushed back as if someone stood up quickly and never came back. They look around and feel like the house is breathing, like it is waiting for the person to return, but the person will not return. They step back outside and the wind touches their faces with cold hands. They walk down the cracked road with nothing in their hands except a small blue bag and a hope that someone will give them water. Someone will give them a reason to keep walking. Someone will give them a reason to keep breathing. But the village stays silent and the road keeps going, and they keep walking because there is nothing else to do and nothing else to find except the woman they will meet at the edge of the forest. The first human they will see, the one they will call Baba Yaga without knowing why. They find the old woman at the edge of the forest, her hair wild, her fingers long, like roots. She does not smile, she only tilts her head, and they cannot look away. From her eyes they are sharp like broken glass and dark like the bottom of the well they passed, and there is something in those eyes that makes the cold air feel colder. They stop walking for a moment because they are not sure if she is real, because the village was empty, and they are not sure if they are dreaming or awake. But she is there, standing with her feet in the mud, with her shoulders wrapped in a black shawl that moves like the wings of a crow. She is holding a crooked stick that looks more like a twisted branch than something made for walking. Her lips are cracked and pale, and when she breathes, they see the mist in the air curling around her like smoke. She does not speak, and the silence feels heavy, pressing down on their chests, making it hard to swallow. They look at her hands and see dirt under her nails, see the small bones tied to the string around her wrist like tiny white teeth rattling softly as she moves. She lifts her hand and points toward the forest, her fingers shaking but steady, her eyes never leaving theirs. They feel a pull in their stomachs, a fear that tastes like iron on their tongues, but they take a step forward because they are hungry and tired, and there is nowhere else to go. The village behind them is full of empty rooms and empty chairs and empty beds, but this woman is alive, and she is the first human they have seen in so long that they have forgotten how to speak to another person. They take another step and she turns without a sound, her feet sinking into the wet ground with every slow step. The forest behind her is dark, the trees standing like tall shadows, the branches reaching down like hands. They look back at the road one last time, the cracked lines running away into the distance, and they know if they turn back now, there will be nothing for them, nothing but the wind and the dust and the memory of empty houses. So they follow her because her silence is better than the silence of the village, because the forest, even if it is dark, might have water, might have bread, might have answers to questions they do not know how to ask. She moves slowly and they match her pace, watching the shawl sway with every step, the twisted stick pressing into the mud. with a quiet sound that is almost comforting. The closer they get to the trees, the colder the air feels, the light above them fading, as if the sky itself is afraid to follow them into the forest. They look up and see the tops of the trees like black veins against the pale sky. They hear the wind whispering through the branches like voices, too soft to understand. The old woman does not look back. She does not speak. She only keeps walking deeper into the forest, and they keep following because it is all they can do, because they are afraid to lose sight of her, because in that moment, they feel that if they lose her they will be lost forever in the silence of the world that has forgotten them. She turns without a word and they follow, because the village is empty and the air behind them feels cold, like something unseen breathing on their necks. They step into the forest and the world changes. The light bends through the branches like thin fingers scratching across their faces. The leaves crunch under their feet, but it sounds too loud, like the forest does not want to hear them here. The woman moves ahead of them, her shawl brushing against low branches that bend as she passes, and spring back when they follow. The trees stand close together, their trunks dark with moss, their branches heavy with shadows, and they can feel eyes watching them from between the leaves. Small rustles in the underbrush like whispers too quick to catch. They walk and the air smells of wet earth and rotting wood and something sweet like old fruit. They see mushrooms growing in circles around the base of trees, white and red and brown. Some shaped like small cups filled with rainwater, others flat like coins pressed into the mud. They do not speak because the forest feels like it will swallow any word they try to say and leave nothing behind but the echo. The old woman walks with a slow, careful step, her stick pressing into the mud with each movement, making a quiet, steady rhythm that keeps them from feeling lost. They follow that sound like following a heartbeat in the dark. She leads them deeper where the trees grow thicker and the sky above is just a thin strip of gray, and they can barely see the clouds moving. They pass a tree with a deep split in its trunk, and inside the split they see something glinting like glass, but when they look closer, it is gone. They walk past a fallen log covered in pale fungi that glow softly in the shadows, and they think of lanterns left by someone long gone, but the light is cold and does not warm them. They hear water somewhere ahead, a soft, trickling sound that makes their dry throats tighten with hope. The woman does not stop, but they glance at each other and quicken their steps, because water means life, even if the forest feels like it is breathing around them, even if the branches seem to reach lower as they walk. She leads them to a small stream, the water clear but dark, with shadows of leaves moving on its surface. She kneels and dips her hand into the water, and they watch the ripples spreading out like quiet rings. They kneel to their hands, shaking as they reach into the cold stream and bring the water to their lips. It tastes of earth and stone, but it is clean, and it is enough for now. The old woman stands and waits, her eyes on them as they drink, and in that moment they feel like children again. They feel like the world is watching them and waiting for them to move. They finish drinking and wipe their mouths on their sleeves and look up at her, and she turns and continues walking deeper into the forest, and they stand and follow because there is nothing else to do, because the road behind them is gone and the trees ahead are dark and deep, and the old woman is the only human they have seen in forever. And they do not want to lose her in the shadows of this forest that feels alive with every breath they take. The forest swallows them, the trees rising like towers, the ground soft with fallen leaves that smell of rain and rot, and they hear whispers like someone walking just behind them, but when they turn there is nothing there, only the slow sway of branches above them and the crackle of wet leaves under their feet. They keep close to the old woman, watching the way her shawl moves like a dark flag against the gray light. The air feels heavy, like it is pressing against their chests with every breath, and the shadows between the trees look like doorways to places that do not want to be found. They see shapes in the corner of their eyes, shapes that move when they look away and vanish when they turn their heads, and every sound feels like a footstep, every rustle feels like a breath, and they are afraid to stop walking, afraid to fall behind. The old woman steps over twisted roots that rise like the bones of the forest, pulling at their ankles as they pass, and they stumble, but they do not cry out because the forest feels like it will echo their fear back to them. They walk past trees with carvings in the bark, lines and symbols they do not understand, some of them fresh with the wood still pale, and bleeding sap that smells sharp in the cold air. They walk past a clearing where black feathers are scattered across the ground like pieces of night, and in the center is a circle of stones with ashes in the middle, and the ashes are still warm when they touch them. But the old woman does not stop. She keeps walking as if she does not see the feathers, as if she does not see the stones and the ashes. They follow because they cannot let her out of their sight, because the forest feels like it will close around them if they lose her. They walk until their legs ache, until their mouths are dry again, until the light begins to fade and the forest turns darker. With every step they take, they can smell smoke in the air, a thin, sharp scent that curls around their heads and makes them think of fire and warmth, but also of danger. They look ahead and see a light flickering between the trees, a small red glow like an eye opening in the darkness, and the old woman is walking toward it, her stick tapping against the ground with a sound that is almost like a knock asking the forest to let them pass. They reach a clearing where a small hut leans to one side, its roof patched with pieces of metal and wood, its windows dark, the smoke rising from a crooked chimney. The door is open just enough for them to see the light inside, the glow of a fire dancing on the walls. The old woman steps inside without looking back, and they stand for a moment at the edge of the clearing, their feet sinking into the wet leaves. The forest around them holding its breath. They can hear the crackle of the fire inside the hut, the hiss of something boiling, the low creak of wood moving. They look at each other, and then they step forward because there is nothing else but the dark behind them, and the forest is watching, and the light is the only thing that feels real. And they step through the door into the warmth and the smell of herbs and smoke and something else they cannot name, and the door closes softly behind them. She stops at a crooked hut with a door hanging sideways, smoke curling from a bent chimney. She lights a small fire with a single match, and the light dances on her sharp cheekbones. The hut smells of wet wood and herbs, drying in bunches tied to the low beams. The smoke makes their eyes water, but the warmth touches their skin like a memory they did not know they missed. The old woman moves around the small space, her bare feet silent on the dirt floor, her stick leaning against the wall. As she pours water into a black pot, the fire hisses as she lowers the pot, and the smell of the smoke changes, becoming softer, mixed with the scent of pine and bitter leaves. They watch her hands move, thin and dark, with veins like lines on an old map, as she drops pieces of roots and dried flowers into the water. The bubbling sound fills the small room, and it feels like a heartbeat in the silence. Outside, the wind pushes against the walls and the old boards creak, but the fire holds the dark away, and they sit close to it, their legs pulled against their chests, the warmth sinking into their bones. The old woman hums under her breath, a tune that sounds like the forest, like the rustle of branches and the sigh of rain on leaves, and it makes them think of when they were children, when they listened to stories before sleep, stories about witches and forests and the things that waited in the dark. The old woman stops humming and looks at them with her sharp eyes, her head tilted, as if she is listening to something they cannot hear, and then she speaks. Her voice is low and cracked like branches breaking in the cold. She tells them of the children who came to the forest looking for food, looking for safety, looking for something they could not name. She tells them of the mothers who called their names until their voices broke, of fathers who promised to return and never did. She tells them of the ones who walked so far they forgot where they started and who they were and what they were looking for, until the forest took their names and their voices and their breath and left only the wind to remember them. They listen because there is nothing else to do, because the forest outside feels like it is pressing against the walls. Listening to the old woman stirs the pot, and the steam rises around her head like a cloud, hiding her eyes for a moment. She reaches for a small wooden bowl with a crack down the side and fills it with the steaming liquid, holding it out to them. They take it with shaking hands, the warmth of the bowl sinking into their fingers. They lift it to their lips and drink. The taste is sharp and bitter like earth and leaves and rain, but it is warm, and it is enough. The old woman watches them as they drink, her eyes never blinking, and in that moment, the hut feels like the only place in the world that is alive. The wind outside howls against the walls, the fire cracks, the old woman hums again, and they close their eyes, holding the warmth in their hands as the shadows dance across the walls. She speaks of children who wandered too far, mothers who called their names, fathers who never returned. Her voice is soft, but the forest seems to listen with every breath. The shadows on the walls stretch and sway as if they understand the words. The old woman does not look at them as she talks. She stares into the fire, and the flames move in colors that should not exist, deep greens and thin lines of blue like veins in a leaf. She tells them how the forest keeps what it loves, how it feeds on the steps of the lost and the tears of those who call out in the dark. She tells them how the birds sometimes speak the names of the missing, how the wind sometimes sounds like laughter or crying, or both at once, and they feel the warmth of the bowl in their hands turning cold as her words crawl under their skin. She tells them of a girl with hair the color of autumn leaves, who followed a fox into the deep woods, of a boy who chased the echo of his father's voice until the trees swallowed him, of a mother who stood at the edge of the forest calling until her voice was gone and she became a shadow that wanders between the trunks, searching for her children. They listen because the stories sound like the wind they heard on the road, like the emptiness of the houses they passed, like the silence that followed them into the forest. The old woman's voice is low and steady like the beat of a drum under the earth. She tells them, "The forest does not forget those who enter it." She tells them the forest does not forgive those who leave it. She tells them the forest has roots that drink dreams and branches that catch whispers and leaves that remember footsteps. She tells them that if they listen, they can hear the forest breathing around them even now, and they do listen. They close their eyes and they hear it. The soft hiss like the breath of something vast and old just beyond the walls of the hut, the crack of twigs underweight, the rustle of something moving between the trees. The forest is awake and it knows they are here. The old woman places another log on the fire. The flames jump and crack and shadows rush across the walls, and sealing the bunches of dried herbs hanging from the beams sway slightly in a breeze. They cannot feel. She hums again, that same soft melody, and it feels like the forest itself is humming with her. They open their eyes and watch the flames, the way they move like the branches of trees in a storm. The old woman's eyes catch the light, and for a moment they look like the eyes of an animal, deep green and sharp as thorns. She stops humming, and the silence feels alive, pressing close around them, waiting for them to speak, but they do not know what to say, so they hold the empty bowl in their hands and listen to the fire and the forest. And the old woman who sits across from them with her eyes full of stories and shadows. The fire burns low and the shadows grow longer, crawling up the walls like black vines. The old woman does not speak. Now she only watches them with eyes that do not blink, and they feel the silence pressing into their bones. They hear the forest breathing outside, the low hush of leaves moving like a whisper, like a promise. The old woman stands without sound, her bare feet touching the cold dirt floor as she moves to a small shelf near the crooked window. Her hands reach for a bundle wrapped in dark cloth tied with a single red string. She carries it back to the fire and sits down slowly, as if the air itself is heavy. She unties the string with careful fingers and unfolds the cloth layer by layer, and inside there are small objects that catch the light, bones tied together with thin twined black feathers, a small wooden carving of something with too many eyes, a shard of glass that glints blue in the firelight, a stone with a hole in the center. She lays them out in front of the fire, her hands hovering above them like she is waiting for them to move, and for a moment they think the objects do move, shifting in the light, like insects, like something breathing. The old woman hums softly the same melody she hummed before, but now it sounds different, slower and deeper, like a chant. She picks up the stone with the hole and holds it to her eye, looking through it at them, and they feel something cold brush against their hearts, like a wet leaf in the dark. She places the stone down and picks up the carving, her fingers tracing the lines of its many eyes, and she holds it close to her chest for a moment. Before setting it down again, she touches each object as if reminding them of their place, and then she looks at them, and for the first time she speaks their name. They do not know how she knows it. They have not spoken it in so long that it feels like a word belonging to someone else, but the way she says it makes the hut feel smaller, the shadows leaning in to listen, the fire crackling louder. She tells them the forest knows their name too. She tells them the forest has been waiting for them since the day they were born. She tells them the forest does not forget, and it does not lose what belongs to it. She tells them they belong to it now. They feel their breath catch in their chest as the words sink into them, heavy and cold. The old woman's eyes do not leave theirs, and she reaches out with one thin hand touching their forehead lightly, and they feel a rush of warmth and cold at the same time, like stepping into water, like falling into the wind. The fire flares up bright for a moment, casting the room in sharp light, before settling again. The old woman pulls her hand back and leans against the wall, her eyes closing, as if tired. The objects in front of the fire remain still, but they feel like they are watching, like they are waiting for something. They sit in the quiet, listening to the forest outside and the fire inside, and the slow sound of the old woman's breathing as the shadows hold them in place. They sit in the hush of the hut with the fire crackling low, the shadows breathing around them. The old woman does not open her eyes, but they know she is not asleep. Her breathing is slow and steady like the ticking of a clock they have never seen, but can feel inside their chest. They look at the objects by the fire, the bones tied with twine, the black feathers, the carving with too many eyes, the shard of blue glass, the stone with the hole. They watch as the light shifts across them, the shadows, flickering like small dark hands reaching and pulling back. Outside the forest whispers, louder branches brushing against each other like voices arguing in the dark. The wind moves around the hut, pressing against the walls, and they can hear it breathing. They can hear it calling their name, the name the old woman spoke, the name the forest knows the name. They had almost forgotten. They pull the thin blanket around their shoulders, but the cold finds them anyway, sliding down their spine like water. They look at the old woman, her eyes still closed, her lips moving without sound, and they realize she is speaking to the forest, speaking to the shadows, speaking to something that has no shape. They do not know how. They know, but they know she is asking the forest to wait, asking the shadows to wait, asking the cold to wait for just a little longer. They look at the objects again, and see that the shard of blue glass is catching the firelight in a way that makes it look like it is holding a tiny flame inside. They reach for it, but stop, their hand hovering over the cloth, because they feel the cold rising from the shard, like frost on their skin. The old woman opens her eyes and the firelight catches in them, green and sharp and alive. She looks at them and shakes her head slowly, and they pull their hand back. The shard of glass remains still, but they feel it watching them like the carving with many eyes. The old woman tells them in her low voice that the forest asks for a promise, that the forest waits for a promise, that the forest will take what it is owed unless given something in return. She tells them the forest does not forget the footsteps that enter its shadow, and they understand that to leave the forest they must leave a part of themselves behind. They must leave a promise behind. They must give the forest something to hold, so it will not follow them, so it will not take more than they can give. They look around the hut, at the low beams, the bundles of herbs, the cracked window, the dirt floor, and they realize there is nothing here that belongs to them, nothing but the name the old woman spoke, nothing but the breath they hold in their chest, nothing but the small warmth left in their hands from the fire. They look at the old woman, and she nods once slowly, and the wind outside stops for a moment. The branches hold still, the shadows hold still, the fire holds still, and they know it is time to choose what they will leave behind. They sit by the low fire, as the old woman waits, her eyes bright in the dark, her hands resting on her knees. The wind outside has fallen silent, the branches no longer moving, the shadows no longer swaying. The forest is waiting, holding its breath. As they search inside themselves for what they can give, they think of the name the old woman spoke, the name the forest knows the name. They had nearly forgotten, and they feel it heavy in their chest like a stone. They think of the warmth of their breath, the small hope they have carried like a hidden flame. They think of the memories of laughter and of voices calling them home, voices that have grown quiet as the roads grew long and the days grew empty. They look at the old woman, and she nods once, as if she sees what they are holding and understands. They reach into the space between their breaths, and they take the memory of a morning when the sun rose over the hills, when the air smelled of new rain and warm earth, when they heard someone call their name with love and laughter and promise, and they hold it in their hands for a moment, seeing the light in the memory, the soft glow that feels like dawn. They see the smile on a face they cannot fully remember, but they feel it, warm and alive. They look at the old woman again, and she does not move, but her eyes tell them it is enough. They lean forward and place the memory among the objects on the cloth, near the bones, near the feathers, near the carving with too many eyes, near the shard of blue glass, near the stone with the hole. They watch as the memory becomes a small glow, a tiny warm light that hovers above the cloth for a moment before sinking down and disappearing. The forest breathes in slowly, the air pressing against the walls of the hut, the branches outside moving softly as if in relief, the shadows pulling back toward the corners, the fire crackling louder for a heartbeat before settling. The old woman closes her eyes and exhales, and they feel the weight in the room shift. The forest has taken the promise, the forest has accepted the gift. The forest will let them leave. They feel the name in their chest change, growing softer like a whisper, like a sigh, like a leaf falling. They feel the memory leave them, the warmth of that morning gone, the scent of rain gone, the sound of laughter gone. It leaves an emptiness that is quiet and deep, but it is a quiet they can carry. They look at the old woman, and she opens her eyes and smiles for the first time. The shadows in the room lift, and the air feels lighter. The fire glows warm. The old woman points to the door, and they understand it. It's time to go. They stand slowly, their legs stiff, their hands empty, their heart changed. They step to the door and open it. The forest waits outside, the dawn gray and quiet, the trees no longer pressing, the shadows no longer pulling, the forest watching but not holding. They take a breath of the cold morning air and step out, the old woman watching them as they walk away, the forest behind them alive but satisfied, and they walk toward the thin light of dawn with the road opening ahead.